The Arizona high desert wasn't known for nights like this. Winters were cold, yes, but never this cruel, never this bone-deep, breath-stealing kind of cold that wrapped the land like a white death shroud. Snow blew across the vast plains in angry spirals, stinging like needles and swallowing the moonlight. The Hartley Ranch sat alone under the storm, its wooden fences nearly buried, its corrals silent, its animals huddled in the barns for warmth. Inside the modest log cabin, Luke Hartley stirred the fire one last time. Sparks jumped upward, dancing in the stone hearth before fading into the chimney dark. He had planned on reading a little before bed, maybe checking the barns again at dawn. The storm had moved in too fast for him to ride the perimeter tonight. All he could do was wait it out. He took off his gloves and set them on the table when it happened, a faint sound. Barely audible. A tap. Then another. A knock. Luke froze. Nobody traveled these roads at night, not in this weather, not unless they wanted to become part of the frozen landscape by morning. He grabbed his coat and moved toward the door, boots crunching over the wooden floor. "Who's out there?" he called, though the wind swallowed his voice. No answer. Only the storm. With a cautious exhale, he unlatched the heavy iron bar and pulled the door open. The wind shoved its way inside, carrying snow and cold so bitter it burned. At first Luke saw nothing but white swirling shapes, until one of them collapsed forward. A woman. Her body hit the porch planks with a dull thud, as if she didn't have the strength to break her fall. "Ma'am, hey, stay with me." Luke knelt instantly. She was small, wrapped in thin, worn clothing not meant for winter, certainly not for a desert blizzard. Her skin was ice cold, her lips trembling, her lashes dusted in frozen crystals. Her braids were stiff with frost. She looked up at him with half-lidded eyes, struggling to form words. "Please, let me in." Her voice was barely more than a breath. Luke didn't hesitate again. He swept off his coat and wrapped it around her, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. When he stood, she curled instinctively toward the warmth, her fingers weakly gripping his shirt. "It's all right," he murmured, kicking the door shut behind him. "You're safe now." He carried her toward the fire, the heat already melting some of the frost on her hair. Gently, he set her on a blanket near the hearth and checked her hands. They were red, shaking violently, the signs of deep cold exposure. "What happened to you?" he asked softly. Her eyes flickered open again, dark and exhausted. "Storm. I got caught. But the rest faded, swallowed by her shivers. Luke added more wood to the fire, his jaw tightening. Whoever she was, wherever she had come from, she hadn't deserved to battle the storm alone. The fire crackled louder as the wood caught, sending waves of heat across the small cabin. Luke stayed beside the woman, watching carefully as warmth slowly returned to her face. The violent shivers had eased, though her breathing remained shallow, fragile, like a single spark fighting against a winter gale. He grabbed a tin cup, poured warm water from the kettle, and held it near her lips. "Easy now," he said. "Small sips." She obeyed, though her hands trembled too much to lift the cup herself. Luke supported her gently, not wanting to overwhelm her weakened body. She exhaled shakily, steam rising from her breath. "What's your name?" he asked. Her eyes fluttered open fully for the first time, and he realized how striking they were, dark, alert even in exhaustion, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. "Tallulah," she said softly. "Tallulah Whitehorse." "All right, Tallulah. I'm Luke Hartley. You're at my ranch." Her gaze traveled around the cabin, the wooden beams, the iron stove, the neatly arranged tools, the small window where snow slammed against the glass. She swallowed, still wrapped in his heavy coat. "I didn't want to intrude." "You didn't intrude," he said firmly. "You were freezing. Anyone would have let you in." Her expression suggested she didn't entirely believe that. Not everyone had shown her kindness before, Luke could tell without her saying a word. He shifted a log in the fire, letting the flames brighten the room. "How long were you out there?" he asked. Tallulah hesitated. "A while. Longer than I should have been. The storm came faster than I expected." "You traveling alone?" A pause. A shadow crossed her features, subtle but heavy. "Yes." Luke didn't push, though curiosity tugged at him. The high desert wasn't a place people wandered alone in winter, especially not someone dressed for autumn, carrying no supplies, no pack, no horse in sight. She looked so small wrapped in his oversized coat, yet something in her posture suggested a quiet resilience. He handed her a bowl of warm broth. "Try this. It'll help." Tallulah took a careful sip. Then another. Bit by bit, her color returned. The trembling in her legs eased, though Luke could tell she was still exhausted beyond measure. Outside, the storm raged harder, shaking the cabin walls, howling through the narrow gaps of the window frames. Luke glanced toward the door, grateful he had heard her knock when he did. Another hour and she might have been swallowed by the desert's brutal cold. Tallulah followed his gaze. "I thought the storm would pass," she murmured. "I thought I could make it to the next town before night." "You were miles away from it," Luke said. "The nearest settlement is 2 hours by horse even in clear weather." She looked down, embarrassed. "I had nowhere else to go." Luke softened. He wasn't a man easily swayed by emotion, but something about her honesty, her vulnerability, pulled at him. "Well," he said gently, "you've somewhere now. At least until the storm lets up. You're safe here, Tallulah." She met his eyes then, really met them, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of trust breaking through her walls. Inside the cabin, the fire warmed the room. Outside, winter raged on. But Tallulah wasn't alone anymore. The storm showed no mercy. Hours passed, but the wind outside only grew fiercer, rattling the cabin as if demanding entry. Luke set another log on the fire, the orange glow stretching across the wooden floorboards. Tallulah sat wrapped in a blanket now, his coat folded beside her, drying from melted snow. She stared into the flames, her eyes reflecting their restless movement. Luke could sense the heaviness in her silence. He didn't want to press, but he also knew people didn't wander into his ranch by accident. Especially not in a storm that could kill. "You warm enough?" he asked quietly. Tallulah nodded. "More than before." "Good." He settled across from her, leaning on his elbows. "If you need anything, you just say." She hesitated, as if the simple offer tugged at something buried deeply. People didn't often offer her help freely, that much was clear. After a long moment she whispered, "I'm not used to this." "Used to what?" "Kindness without a price." Luke didn't look away. "Then maybe you've been around the wrong people." Tallulah's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but something close. She pulled the blanket a little tighter around her shoulders. "I had no choice," she said. "When you don't have family, or a place waiting for you, you learn to take what you can." He nodded slowly. "You said you were traveling. Where from?" "North of Flagstaff." Her voice was soft, but steady. "My mother died last spring. After that, everything I knew just drifted apart. The rest of my family, my tribe, they had their own struggles. The land's changing. The opportunities are too few for too many people." She took a shaky breath. "I thought I'd try for a new start. Somewhere warmer, somewhere with work. I didn't plan for a blizzard in Arizona." Luke listened without interrupting. Her words carried the weight of someone who had fought too many battles alone. "And you were walking?" he asked. "Yes." She lowered her gaze, almost ashamed. "I didn't have money for a bus. I thought I could make it to Ash River before night. But the storm came early. The cold," she swallowed hard. "It felt like it was closing in on me. I thought," her voice cracked. "I thought maybe that was it." Luke's chest tightened. "It wasn't." Tallulah looked at him, her eyes shimmering in the firelight. "Why did you open the door?" she asked. "Most strangers would have ignored a knock in a storm this bad." "Because I'm not most strangers," Luke said simply. "And because no one deserves to freeze to death on my land." She studied him, trying to decide whether to believe him. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. The warmth spread, but her expression remained shadowed, uncertain. "Luke," she said softly, "I had nothing to offer. No money. No supplies. Nothing but—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. "Tallulah," he said gently, "you don't owe me anything." Her breath shook. A long, heavy silence stretched between them, until finally she exhaled and the tension in her shoulders eased. For the first time since he found her, she looked relieved. The storm still raged outside, but inside the cabin a different storm, fear, suspicion, loneliness, slowly began to settle. And Tallulah Whitehorse, for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to trust someone. Morning arrived quietly, almost shyly, after the long, brutal night. The storm had spent its rage, leaving the Arizona high desert blanketed in a rare layer of snow that sparkled like crushed glass under the rising sun. The sky was a pale gold, the kind that promised a calmer day ahead. Luke opened the cabin door, letting in a breath of crisp, clean air. The cold was still sharp, but compared to the blizzard's bite, it felt almost gentle. He glanced back toward Tallulah, who had fallen asleep on the cot near the fire, the blanket pulled up to her chin. She looked peaceful now, still tired, but no longer trembling, no longer fading. He didn't want to wake her, but the sun was rising, and she deserved to see that she'd made it through. "Tallulah," he said softly. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion briefly clouding them, until memory settled in, and she exhaled. "I'm still here," she murmured. "Storms past," Luke said. "You should see the view." She sat up slowly, stretching her sore muscles. When she stood, she swayed a little, and he steadied her with a gentle hand. Wrapped in his spare coat, she walked toward the door. Luke held it open. Tallulah stepped outside, and her breath caught. The desert she had nearly died in looked transformed, gentle, white-touched, almost magical. Snow clung to the cactus spines and coated the fences, and the distant mesas glowed under the early sunlight. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Storms usually leave something good behind," Luke said. "If you survive them." Tallulah looked down at her boots, half buried in soft snow. "I thought I wouldn't." Her voice was steady now, but underneath it was a truth, one she had wrestled with in the dark, alone, helpless. "You did," Luke said simply. She turned to him then, studying this quiet cowboy who had taken her in without question, who had asked for nothing, who had given her warmth, shelter, and a place to breathe. Again, there was gratitude in her eyes, but something else too. Something calmer. Something brave. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger than it had been since he found her. "For opening the door. For not asking me to give anything back. You don't owe me anything," he said again. "You needed help. That was enough." Tallulah held his gaze. "People don't usually think that way." "Maybe they should," Luke replied, tipping his hat with a small, humble smile. A soft silence settled between them, not awkward, just peaceful. The kind of silence that belongs to people who have shared something rare. "Storm won't clear completely until afternoon," Luke said. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need. There's food, blankets, and it's warmer than the road." She nodded. "I'll stay. At least until I figure out what comes next." Luke stepped aside, letting her walk back into the warm cabin. As he followed, he glanced once more at the snowy horizon. The desert could be harsh, merciless, unforgiving. But sometimes, in the middle of its coldest nights, it left room for moments like this. For survival. For second chances. For the unexpected kindness between two strangers who happened to cross paths in a storm. And for Tallulah, that was enough, for now.